Before the $200 million Spotify deal, before the Joe Rogan experience dominated the internet, Joe Rogan was just another struggling comedian with no clear path to success. But what most people don't know is the real story behind his rise, one filled with struggle, setbacks, and relentless ambition. This is the untold story of Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Born in Newark, New Jersey in 1967, Joe had a very tough upbringing. His dad, a police officer who ended up leaving Joe at the age of 5, left him and his mother due to frequent arguments. Not long after the divorce, Joe and his mother left New Jersey and moved to San Francisco, and later settled in Massachusetts, where Joe attended the university. He ended up dropping out of university to pursue his dream of becoming a comedian, a choice which would eventually snowball into his current success. At 14 years old, Joe Rogan found his first true passion, martial arts. But he wasn't just good, he was one of the best, eventually going on to achieve first place in the US Open Championship. But despite his great achievement, he quickly realized that there was no money in professional fighting. He was struggling to sustain his lifestyle whilst also suffering with the physical impact that professional fighting has over the long term. The hours of training had got to him. It was time for a change. Enter the world of stand-up comedy. Comedy was, and still is, a brutally crowded scene. For newcomers, breaking through the noise was nearly impossible. Joe Rogan spent years sharpening his craft at the Comedy Store in Hollywood, refusing to be paid for 13 straight years. He wasn't there for money, he was there to earn his stripes. His natural charisma and unfiltered style started to connect with audiences. Slowly, his name began to circulate, eventually landing him spots on national television. Those early comedy gigs eventually opened the door to a game-changing opportunity. Joe was cast in News Radio, a hit NBC sitcom that had millions of viewers across the US. He played Joe Garelli, the eccentric, no-nonsense handyman who quickly became a fan favorite. Across 6 successful seasons, Rogan's sharp delivery and natural charm turned his character into one of the show's most memorable roles, further cementing his reputation as more than just a stand-up comic. But behind the scenes, things weren't as perfect as they seemed.
When I was doing news radio, I fell into a spot over a period at least a year where I wasn't writing at all. I didn't do any new jokes. I had the same tired-ass jokes.
Despite being on a hit show, his creative drive was at an all-time low. He later admitted that during those years, he felt like he was just going through the motions. This feeling was not unheard of. It is a case of creative paralysis, whereby his acting made him feel mentally drained, preventing himself from producing the top-quality jokes which had kick-started his career. Joe needed to find an alternative solution, something that would suit his natural comedic character and complement his natural talents. With his stand-up on autopilot and sitcom life wearing thin, Joe found himself craving something real, something raw, and that's when the UFC came knocking.
It's time!
I was in the martial arts world. You know, I used to teach martial arts for a living. Before I became a comedian, I used to fight. Well, I started in 1997. I was the post-fight interviewer.
It was clear that Joe had always been a die-hard martial artist, and the UFC, still in its early days, was the perfect arena for him to bring together his 2 greatest strengths, fighting knowledge and on-the-fly commentary.
He did the first 13 shows for free for us. And then he's like, wait a minute, you're saying that I get to sit in the best seat in the house and watch these fights for free?
Yeah,
I'm in.
At first, Joe worked for free, just like he did back at the Comedy Store. But his passion and deep understanding of combat sports made him stand out. It wasn't long before fans and fighters alike saw him as more than just a commentator. He was the voice of the Octagon. The UFC gave Joe a new platform, but it also gave him something else: purpose. Since the start of Joe's commentating career, he has commentated over 2,500 fights. Joe very quickly became a huge part of the UFC. And just when it seemed like he'd found his groove, something even bigger was waiting around the corner. Something that would be life-changing for Joe. By the late 2000s, Joe Rogan had worn many hats: fighter, comedian, TV star, UFC commentator. But none of it gave him full control. No filter, no agenda. That's when he picked up a mic and hit record. The first episode of the Joe Rogan Experience was launched on the 24th of December, 2009. However, it was not immediately a sensation. The topics and guests on the first show focused on the subjects of comedy and Joe's personal interests, which may not have related to that many people at the time. But with better presenting skills, equipment, and popular guests, the show quickly gained traction. What started as a casual live stream with a friend quickly snowballed into something much bigger. The Joe Rogan Experience wasn't polished, it wasn't corporate, and that's exactly why it worked. Fast forward almost 2 decades later, and Joe has almost achieved 20 million subscribers on YouTube and gets millions of views on every new podcast episode. He has refined the production value of his content. His show topics, guests, and his entire persona resonate with every viewer that tunes in. If it was not for Joe, podcasting would arguably not be where it is today. What started as 2 guys talking into a webcam soon became one of the most influential platforms on the planet. With every new episode, the guest list grew. Comedians, scientists, fighters, philosophers, billionaires. It didn't matter who they were. If the conversation was real, it was worth recording. Around 2018, the numbers were staggering. Millions of views per episode, a global fan base. And then, in 2020, the podcast world changed forever.
A really in-depth report out of the New York Times on Joe Rogan. His overall contract value might be $200 million.
The licensing deal was reported at $100 million, with other sources eventually revealing a $200 million deal, one of the biggest in podcasting history. Suddenly, this wasn't just a show, it was a media empire. The Joe Rogan Experience wasn't built by algorithms or corporate backing. It was built on one simple idea: talk to people and really listen. Most people saw the $100 million Spotify deal as the peak. But for Joe, it was just another chapter. And then in early 2024, the news dropped. Spotify had renewed their deal with Rogan.
Joe Rogan is signing a new deal with the audio streaming giant. The Wall Street Journal saying it's valued at up to $250 million, which would be more than his prior deal, which was rumored at around $200 million.
It's just going to be everywhere now. Well, it's going to be on Apple, Amazon, and YouTube, as well as on Spotify.
Joe Rogan's story isn't about luck. It's not about fame. It's about staying curious, staying honest, and putting in the reps over and over again. His story is a reminder to anyone watching. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect. You just need to start. Stay consistent, stay curious, and the rest will follow. And hey, if you're ready to see the other side of Joe, unfiltered, uncensored, and absolutely hilarious, click on the video pop up on your screen. Thanks for watching.